Hey everyone, my name is Venti and there's a great sale on the eShop going on. And we'll be taking a look at one of the best deals for under $10 that you can pick up right now so as to not break the bank. So without further ado, let's get right into the deals. We're gonna start off the list with Okinawa Rush, a great side-scrolling action game which takes heavy inspiration from those 80s action movies, as you fight your way through endless waves of enemies in some really cool feudal Japan environments. The combat in this game feels really tight, as even though there's only one attack button, you can perform different moves with the directional inputs, which you can chain into some awesome looking combos. And even though you feel like a martial arts powerhouse, the game becomes quite challenging. But thankfully, it does feature local co-op, which in my opinion is where the game really shines. It also has some replay value as there are different endings that you can unlock for each character. At its lowest price ever of $3.99, this game definitely packs a punch. Next up for your strategy fix is the excellent Wargroove, which is very much like old Advance Wars games but in a fantasy setting. For anyone who isn't familiar with it, this is a turn-based strategy game, where you will be fighting for control over territory and resources. Your units have different roles which will determine their strengths and weaknesses, so you must assess your position as well as the map to figure out the best strategy. With the free DLC that was introduced, there are now 5 different factions, each with a distinct feel both in gameplay and aesthetic, and they all have different champions with unique abilities to them. Also, the whole presentation of this game is superb, with excellent pixel art, distinct character design, and even voice acting. Not only is the story mode pretty good, but it has a ton of extra content, like puzzle-like scenarios, cross-play multiplayer, and a ton of user-made content. With a sequel just announced and at its lowest price ever of only $5.99, you might want to groove with this one. This next game is a pretty unique one. You Snail is a tough as nails precision platformer that has you play as a titular snail trying to escape the jaws of a malevolent AI named Squid. I actually reviewed this title and I absolutely loved it. If you want to check out my full review, you can find it in the pinned comment below. Anyway, unlike other similar games, you can't just rely on muscle memory to overcome its levels, as the main gimmick of the game is that the AI will try and predict your movements and place traps and hazards wherever you're heading, so you will have to constantly shift your movement patterns. The game's humor is excellent, with Squid constantly congratulating you on how you managed to fail yet again. Now, the game does include various difficulty options, but it will definitely gel more with those players who like very challenging games. At its lowest price ever of only $5.99, I think you should definitely snail. Now for a more relaxing experience with Far Changing Tides, which is a sequel to the excellent Far Lone Sails, but just a little bit bigger in scope. But don't worry, you don't have to have played the first one to enjoy this, as it's not a direct sequel. Now, this is a very atmospheric puzzle platformer, which has you take control of a boy in a flooded world as you try to make your way ever forward in your ship. You will be managing the ship's various systems, such as adjusting the sails, adding fuel to your engines, and even pumping out any water that finds its way inside. You will also come across many obstacles which will require you to exit your vehicle and solve different environmental puzzles to be able to clear the way. Sure, it's a pretty basic formula, but it works very well. Also, the game does an excellent job at portraying this desolate, yet at times very peaceful world through its somber set pieces, which will keep you engaged throughout this relatively short yet captivating experience. At its lowest price ever of $7.99, maybe it's time to dive in. Now, this next game is one of the usual suspects in these types of sales videos. However, I still think it remains as one of the most unappreciated games out there, and it would be a disservice if I didn't mention it. It is the wonderful Okami, where you play as the incarnation of the sun goddess Amaterasu, or Amy for short, as you try to defend the land from an encroaching darkness. This is an action-adventure game which has a lot of similarities with the Zelda series, in terms of the puzzle solving and unlocking of abilities. It features this beautiful watercolor-like art style which permeates the game, complementing its Japanese setting. It also isn't a very challenging game, which makes for a less stressful experience. At an all-time low of $9.99, this one definitely deserves the spotlight. This next game is a real favorite of mine, and it's Retro City Rampage, a top-down action game very reminiscent to the first two Grand Theft Auto games, but with an 8-bit aesthetic. It features an open world city where you will be taking on missions or just wrecking chaos. It has a ton of 80s pop culture and gaming references, and it never takes itself seriously. For me, this is a great game to just pick up and play for shorter sessions, as the open world sandbox really lends itself to that, and I always have a blast with the ridiculous missions. At an all-time low of $5.99, it would be a crime not to pick this up. Also on sale is the game sequel Shakedown Hawaii, with this one going for a very appropriate upgrade to the 16-bit style. This game is a little bit bigger than Retro City Rampage, and it has a little bit more depth to it, with different characters and even buying properties to grow your empire, but it is just as ridiculous as the first game. However, it cuts back a bit on the pop culture references in favor of a more focused story. Really, what I recommend is just going for the one which style is the most appealing to you, as both are pretty excellent games. This has been lower before, but still, at its current discounted price of $7.99, this one is definitely a steal. Now, for an excellent game that kind of flew under the radar, which is Unrailed. This is a co-op party game, the likes of Overcooked, where you all try to work together to get your train to the next station, by building tracks as it slowly moves forward. Now, this might sound simple enough, but trust me, the game is set up to make this a very chaotic endeavor. By limiting the tools you have, and even the space you have to maneuver, you will quickly swear someone in your team is an imposter working against you. What I love about this game is that the concept here is pretty easy to understand, but the juggling of responsibilities and tasks for each player changes constantly and is a much more dynamic affair than in other similar games. This game is total mayhem, but in the best of ways. And it thankfully features crossplay across all platforms, so you can play with your friends anywhere. At an all-time low of $4.99, this one should be on track to your library. Next up is Curse of the Dead Gods, which is an action roguelite very much like Hades, but with a little bit more finesse to the combat. Now, don't get me wrong, the weapons here feel brutal, but what I mean is that you have this stamina system, so you can't just spam attack or dodge, but rather have to think carefully when to commit an attack. You can always replenish your stamina by parrying attacks at just the right moment, which makes mastering the combat very satisfying. There is also a curse system which will have you balancing immediate gains against gradually building up adverse effects. The game has an amazing visual style with a lot of contrast between bright colors against the shadowy environments. Being one of the best games in its genre and at an all-time low of $9.99, you might end up cursing yourself if you don't pick this up. The next game on the list is Yonder, the Cloudcatcher Chronicles, which is a pretty chill exploration game. You find yourself shipwrecked on a magical island, but you will quickly make this place your own by building a farm, trading with different villages, taming animals, among other things. There is absolutely no combat in this game, so it ends up being a much more leisurely experience. The core of this game is exploring, so all the progression is tied to it. As you unlock new areas of the island, you will gain access to new plants and animals for your farm, new villages to trade with, and more blueprints for crafting. The game has a very charming look and feel to it, which does a great job at enticing you to discover what could be over that next hill. At its lowest price ever of $8.99, this game is well worth exploring. Now, in the complete opposite direction lies the next game, Green Hell, which is a hardcore survival game which will have you trying to stay alive in a jungle where anything and everything will kill you. From a hungry jaguar just trying to secure its next meal, to a sip of parasite-ridden water. The name of the game here is Persistence though, as little by little you will gain both the knowledge and the tools to overcome the dangers in this world and advance the story, which involves you and your wife's research on a local tribe due to their high health and apparent immunity to disease. The game's graphics are a bit mushy, but for such a demanding game, this is kind of expected. So for people looking for a more realistic survival experience, at its all-time low of just $2.49, this is a hell of a deal. The next game on the list is Dadish, which is what you get when you cross a dad, a radish, and some great platforming. Now, this is a short but sweet platformer with some Super Mario World vibes and a bunch of dad jokes, in which you are a dad radish trying to get your kid radishes back home for dinner to eat whatever it is that's below a radish in the food chain. Anyway, there's no combat in this game, so no stomping enemies, just a jump and a double jump. The game starts easy enough, but as you progress through the levels, it gets a little bit more challenging, but never to the point of it being frustrating. This, with the fact that the overall look and feel of the game is pretty bright and cheerful, makes for a great pick for the younger players. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with the game, and if you're hungry for a great little light-hearted platformer at an all-time low of $1.99, this radish will certainly do. Up next is Black Future 88, a 2D roguelite action shooter with a unique twist. Your heart is about to explode, and you have a set amount of time to climb a tower and kill the owner before you flatline. The game's presentation is gorgeous, with the deep blacks accompanied by the bright neon lights and flashing bullets. And also the soundtrack is pretty amazing. In terms of the gameplay, it's pretty quick and varied. You will be racing through each room, trying to clear all the enemies on it and then quickly getting to the next one. Going for alternative paths may lead to secret bosses and therefore additional rewards, but at the risk of running out of time. It does feature 2-player local co-op, which makes up for the fact that it is relatively light on content compared to other roguelites. However, at its lowest price ever of $1.99, you better get this before your heart explodes, or it goes out of sale. A tale as old as time. Devs tried to put a game that was made to be played with a mouse and keyboard onto a console played with a controller. Does the Viking RTS Northgard succeed in this endeavor where so many have failed? The short answer, yes, but not without its compromises, mostly on the performance side and of course the controls, as it does require some amount of time to really get used to using the controller, but it is doable. And in my opinion, if you're into this type of game, it is definitely worth the time investment, as the game itself is pretty good with a lot of interesting mechanics, like having to gather enough resources for your village to endure the coming winter, and also features many paths to victory, which is also a welcome addition. The different Viking clans also feel distinct enough from each other to warrant trying different tactics. So, all in all, if you're a real-time strategy fan at a discounted price of $9.79, this one is definitely worth a pillaging. Just do keep in mind the performance issues and learning curve. And lastly, we have Prinny, Can I Really Be the Hero?, which is an excellent but very difficult action platformer set in the Disgaea universe, where you play as the Prinnys, which are these penguin embodiments of human souls sent to the netherworld. As with the rest of the Disgaea series, expect a ridiculous adventure and silly humor. In here, your boss, Master Etna, has lost her ultimate dessert, so she tasked a lot of you to gather the ingredients for it or face the consequences, which may or not involve explosions, but it certainly involves death. So, the gimmick here is that you have a set amount of lives to finish the game. 1,000 Prinnys, 1,000 lives. And even though it sounds like a lot, you will quickly find out just how fast you can lose several dozen Prinnys on a particularly difficult section. The enemy designs and boss fights are amazing, and even though this game originally came out for the PSP, it still looks fairly decent. The sequel is also on sale, but I did enjoy the first one much more. Anyway, matching its previous low of $9.99, this is one hell of a deal, dude. So that's it for this sales video. I really hope you found it useful and maybe help you find a new game. Anyway, I really appreciate you guys who stayed to the very end of the video. And you know what? I hope you have a great day today. See you in the next one. Bye!